This happened in October of 2022, in a quiet little town called Hollow Creek, Pennsylvania. I'd been living there for almost 8 years by then, in a small single-story home tucked between maple trees that turned a deep red every fall. The place was peaceful, maybe too peaceful, the kind of neighborhood where the loudest thing you'd hear was the wind dragging dry leaves across the street. Back before the pandemic, Halloween used to be a huge deal here. Every house had decorations, pumpkins, lights, fake cobwebs, the works. But after 2020, it just died out. People stopped caring. Kids didn't go trick-or-treating anymore, and most houses went dark by nightfall. By 2022, I'd gotten used to it. The quiet, the emptiness. I honestly thought this Halloween would be like the last few, silent, uneventful, and cold. That morning, I woke up early, made myself a cup of coffee, and stepped out onto the porch. The air had that crisp bite only late October mornings. I was halfway through my first sip when I noticed something that immediately set me on edge. 2 figures stood near the edge of my yard, about 30 or 40 feet away, right where the trees started. At first, I thought they were just kids waiting for the school bus or maybe cutting through the neighborhood. But then I noticed the masks. One wore what looked like an old, cracked pumpkin mask, and the other had on a pale, white, featureless face like something out of those cheap 80s slasher movies. Both of them were tall and thin, too tall to be little kids. They weren't moving, just standing there, facing my house. When I opened the screen door a little louder than I meant to, both of them flinched. For a split second, they froze completely, and then turned around, walking quickly back into the trees. Not running, but walking fast. Like they didn't want to look scared, but definitely didn't want to be seen either. It was one of those moments where your brain tries to make it make sense. Teenagers pulling some prank. Maybe Halloween coming up. Sure, it was weird, but not impossible. Still, something about how deliberate it felt unsettled me. I brushed it off, finished my coffee, and went back inside. The rest of the day was normal. I worked from home, cooked dinner, and around 4 p.m., decided to grab a small bag of candy out of habit. Really, nobody had knocked in years, but it felt wrong to skip it altogether. As the sun went down, I sat on the couch, flipping through channels until I found one doing a marathon of old horror movies. The house felt warm and comfortable compared to the chill outside. I left the blinds open, just in case a rare trick-or-treater did show up. Hours went by nothing. No footsteps on the porch, no laughter down the street, just a few passing cars and the soft hum of the TV. It was around 8:10 when someone knocked. It startled me so bad, I dropped the remote. The knock was sharp 3 solid bangs against the wood. My heart started racing as I looked toward the window, but I didn't see anyone. I wasn't even sure if I wanted to open the door, but after a second, I grabbed the candy bowl and did. And there they were, the same 2 figures from that morning. Same masks, same height, same silence. They stood completely still, side by side on my porch, both wearing black hoodies and gloves. There were no candy bags, no costumes, just masks. I tried to laugh a little, playing it off. "Trick or treat?" I asked, my voice cracking just slightly. Neither of them moved. The porch light glared off their masks, hiding their eyes completely. The silence stretched for too long, and I could feel that cold weight of fear creeping up my spine. I forced a weak smile, held out the bowl, and said, "All right, suit yourselves," before closing the door. My hand was shaking. I peeked through the side window a few seconds later. "Tay where a gonin'?" Who's like that? No footsteps, no sound. Vanished into the dark street. For a while, I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Just some local teens trying to freak out the weird guy who still gave out candy. I even laughed about it while I watched TV again. By midnight, I'd nearly forgotten about them. That changed around 1:45 a.m. A knock echoed through the house again. Louder this time. Hard enough that the door rattled. I sat up in bed, frozen. The sound came again, 3 heavy thuds. I grabbed my phone and crept to the window overlooking the porch. Only one of them was there now, the one in the white mask. Standing perfectly still, head tilted slightly toward the door. My stomach dropped. I didn't turn on any lights. I didn't move. Just watched. After a few seconds, he started knocking again, slow, steady, deliberate. Then I realized something. The motion light on the side of the house had flicked on, meaning someone was there too on the other side of my home. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely think. I backed away from the window, trying to figure out what to do when I heard it. A soft creak from the hallway behind me. It sounded like one of the floorboards near the kitchen. I turned my head, and through the dark, I saw the faintest movement of shadow stepping into the hall. A was seen side. For half a second, we just stared at each other. The figure wore the cracked pumpkin mask. Then he lunged forward, fast, with something metallic glinting in his hand. I sprinted up the stairs, slammed my bedroom door, and shoved the dresser in front of it, while grabbing my phone to call 911. My hands were shaking so bad I nearly dropped it. From behind the door, I could hear muffled voices. Two of them, low, whispering, urgent. I couldn't make out what they said. My heart was hammering so hard it felt like it was shaking the whole room. After maybe 30 seconds, I heard them moving again down the stairs, through the living room, and then silence. When the police arrived, the front door was wide open. They searched the house and the yard, but didn't they find Anyon? Nothing was stolen, nothing broken, except for a muddy footprint on the kitchen tile-sized 12-men's shoe, they said. It was clear what had happened. One of them distracted me at the door while the other found another way in. Probably a back window. If I hadn't gone upstairs when I did, I don't like thinking about how it might have ended. The officers patrolled the neighborhood for a while but didn't find anything. Nobody else reported seeing masked people that night. A few days later, I saw a post on the local Hollow Creek Facebook group. Someone a few streets over had spotted two people in all black walking through their yard on Halloween night. Around midnight, both wearing masks. They thought it was a prank until their security camera caught them trying door handles. Police said they never caught them. Since that night, I've replaced every lock, installed cameras, motion lights, the works. But every Halloween now, when the air gets cold and the leaves start turning, I can't sit on that porch anymore. I don't even open the door if someone knocks, because every October, part of me still expects to see them standing there silent, waiting at the edge of the trees. This happened in late October of 1987, right before the first snow fell over Ashbury County, Maine. At the time, I was a wildlife photographer mostly, part-time gigs and freelance assignments. That week, I'd been hiking through the Ashbury woods, trying to capture some late fall shots before winter set in. The forest up there was massive, miles of trails, streams, and abandoned cabins left over from the 50s logging days. Most people stayed away from that area once October rolled around too cold, too isolated, and, as the locals put it, the woods get strange after dark. I always assumed that was just small-town superstition. That Saturday, I parked my truck at a small trailhead just before dusk. My plan was to hike in a few miles, snap a few long exposure shots of the sunset through the trees, and head back before it got too dark. I had my camera, tripod, and a flashlight. The air was still quiet and colder than it should have been for that time of year. By 6:45 p.m., the sun was gone, and that deep autumn chill had crept in. I packed up my gear and started heading back down the trail, following the crunch of leaves beneath my boots. For a while, it was peaceful, just the sound of the wind through the branches. Then I heard something else. At first, it was faint, a rhythmic crack, like a branch snapping under weight. It came from somewhere behind me. I stopped walking. The sound stopped too. I turned around, shining my flashlight along the path, but the beam just caught the fog hanging between the trees. Nothing moved. I told myself it was probably a deer or raccoon and kept walking, but every few seconds, I heard it again, footsteps. Heavy ones. Slow. Matching my pace, I stopped a second time, my heart starting to race. I swept the flashlight in wide arcs through the trees, calling out, "Hey, anyone there?" Silence. The woods suddenly felt wrong, like they were holding their breath. Even the wind had stopped. I picked up my pace, trying to stay calm. I could see my breath now, white and steady in the beam of my light. A few more minutes passed before I saw the wooden marker that meant I was less than a mile from the trailhead. Relief started to wash over me until I realized the forest had gone completely silent. No birds, no rustle, nothing. Then, from somewhere ahead of me, maybe 30 feet, something moved between the trees. It wasn't fast, it wasn't animal-like, just a tall, slow-moving silhouette, gliding across the path and disappearing again. I froze. My flashlight caught the briefest glimpse of it. A shape too tall and thin to be human, moving in jerky, uneven motions, like it didn't quite understand how to walk. Every instinct screamed at me to run. I took off down the trail, branches whipping at my face, heart pounding so loud it drowned out everything else. I didn't look back. When I finally reached my truck, I dove inside, slammed the doors, and locked them. My hands were trembling as I shoved the keys into the ignition and flicked on the headlights. For a split second, I thought I saw something standing at the edge of the trail in my mirrors just beyond the reach of the headlights. But then the engine roared to life, and I sped out of there so fast I nearly slid off the gravel road. By the time I got home, about a 40-minute drive, I'd convinced myself I was just tired, that my mind had played tricks on me in the dark. I dumped my gear by the door and tried to calm down. But that night, something strange happened. At exactly 2:13 a.m., my motion sensor light in the backyard flicked on. I lived out in the countryside, surrounded by woods, so it wasn't unusual for a raccoon or a stray cat to trigger it. Still, after what had happened earlier, it made my skin crawl. I got up, went to the kitchen window, and looked outside. The yard was empty, but the light stayed on, flickering slightly in the mist. Then, from the tree line at the back of my property, I saw it. A figure, tall, thin, wrung, just standing there at the edge of the woods, motionless. The same uneven proportions I'd seen on the trail. I backed away from the window so fast I nearly tripped. I didn't have curtains, something I suddenly regretted. I grabbed my phone, ready to call the police. But when I looked again, it was gone. I barely slept that night. Every creak of the house made me flinch. Around 4 a.m., I heard what sounded like soft tapping on the side of the house light. Rhythmic, almost like fingernails. By sunrise, I'd made up my mind to check the backyard. I grabbed my camera, zoomed in toward the tree line, and started snapping photos, more out of paranoia than anything. When I uploaded them to my laptop later, most were just blurry shots of trees and folk except for one. In that single photo, dead center, standing just behind a birch tree, was the faint outline of a head. Pale, elongated, tilted at an unnatural angle. I stopped going into those woods after that. A week later, I ran into a local ranger at the diner near the trailhead. I mentioned what I'd seen, half jokingly, half hoping for some logical explanation. The ranger's expression changed immediately. He said, "You were up there after dark." I nodded. He looked down, sighed, and said quietly, "You shouldn't do that. Not in October. There's something about that place. It keeps taking people." He told me about 2 missing hikers the year before, both last seen in the same section of the forest. Their gear was found, but not their bodies. The rangers had stopped searching after the first snow. That night, back at home, I set up a camera by the kitchen window, facing the backyard. It ran on motion detection. For 3 nights, nothing happened. On the 4th, around 3:07 a.m., the camera triggered. When I checked the footage the next morning, my stomach turned to ice. The first few seconds showed only the fog rolling across the yard. Then, slowly, from the darkness at the tree line, something began to move forward tall, bending unnaturally as it stepped into the light. Its skin looked gray and stretched tight, almost translucent. The face, if you could call it, that was smooth, featureless, except for a thin slit where the mouth should have been. It didn't look like a person. It didn't look like anything that should exist. The footage cut off right as it reached the camera, like the battery died instantly. I packed my things that morning and moved out of that house within a week. Sold my gear, stopped taking freelance work, stopped going into the woods altogether, but sometimes, especially when it gets cold and quiet in late October, I still dream about those woods. In to dream, I'm walking that same trail again, camera in hand, The fog rolls in, and everything goes silent. Ten primera e erite crunch of footsteps behind me. Slow. Matching my pace. And no matter how many times I turn around, I never see it. Not until I wake up and realize the motion light outside has just turned on. This happened in the fall of 2021, when I was renting a small farmhouse outside the town of Merrow Hill, Kentucky. I'd moved there after a bad breakup, hoping the isolation would help me reset. The house sat at the edge of an open field, surrounded by miles of empty land and thick forest on all sides. The only other building within sight was an old two-story farmhouse about half a mile away across that same field. It looked abandoned, paint peeling, roof sagging, windows dark. The kind of place you expect raccoons to live in, not people. Or at least, that's what I thought at first. It was late October when the nights started getting colder. Every evening, a heavy fog rolled through the valley and clung to the fields like a slow-moving tide. It made the whole area feel smaller, quieter, like the world stopped existing past that mist. One night, I was standing at the kitchen sink, rinsing out a mug, when I noticed a light flicker in one of the upper windows of the old house across the field. It was faint, like a candle or lantern. I leaned closer to the window, squinting through the fog. Sure enough, there it was, a warm orange glow that flickered twice. 10 went out. I figured someone had finally bought the place, maybe a farmer or a hunter camping out. Still, something about it bothered me. The house had been empty for years, according to my landlord. I went to bed that night thinking about it, telling myself I'd check it out in the morning. But when I stepped outside the next day, the air felt colder than usual. My breath came out in visible clouds as I walked to the end of the property. The field looked untouched. No tire tracks, no footprints, no path leading to the old farmhouse. Still, that night, around 11 p.m., I saw the light again. This time, it wasn't flickering, it was steady, glowing from the upstairs window like someone had left a lamp on. I watched for a few minutes, waiting to see movement. Nothing. Then, just as I was about to turn away, the light suddenly shifted. It moved from the window to the right slowly, like someone carrying it through the hall. That's when I saw a shadow. A tall, narrow silhouette passed in front of the light, pausing at the window for just a second before disappearing. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, curiosity got the better of me. I walked across the field. The grass was damp and cold, soaking through my jeans. When I reached the old house, it looked even worse. Up close, boards warped, shutters hanging loose, the front door swollen shut from years of weather. I circled around to the back, where part of the foundation had caved in. I crouched and peered through a broken window. Inside, everything was coated in dust. Furniture still there, but collapsed in on itself. No footprints, no signs of anyone having been inside recently. So what had I seen? I went back home unsettled, but still trying to rationalize it. Maybe moonlight hitting glass. Maybe some reflection I hadn't noticed. That night, the fog rolled in earlier than usual, thick enough to cover the field like a blanket. I sat by the window, staring across, half expecting that light to appear again. And at exactly 11:06 p.m., it did. Same window, same orange glow. Only this time, something changed. The light moved down slowly, deliberately, like someone was walking down a staircase. And then I saw it again. The shadow. It crossed the lower window, paused, and turned. The shape seemed to be facing my direction. I froze. It was far away, but somehow, I could feel it staring back at me. That night, I kept every light in my house on. The glow from across the field faded around 3 a.m. the next morning. I told my neighbor, an older man named Ray who'd lived in the area his whole life. When I mentioned the house, his expression changed immediately. He said quietly, "That place has been empty since '97. Family that owned it just up and left one night. Never came back." I asked why. Ray hesitated before answering. People said they started seeing things there after dark. Faces in the windows. Lights moving when nobody was home. I laughed it off, but my stomach dropped. That night, the light didn't come on until after midnight. I was lying in bed, trying to ignore the wind, rattling the windows, when I noticed a faint orange glow reflecting off the far wall. I sat up. The light wasn't coming from the farmhouse this time. It was coming from somewhere closer. Heart pounding, I crept to the living room and looked outside. The field was dark except for a single point of orange light halfway between my house and the other one. It was low to the ground, flickering like a lantern being carried by someone walking slowly toward me. I couldn't see who it was, but I could see the way the fog swirled around them, trailing behind as they moved. Step, step, step. I backed away from the window and grabbed my phone, ready to call the police, but there was no signal. None. I flicked off every light in the house and crouched, low near the kitchen counter, listening. The wind had died down. The only sound left was the faint rustle of grass from outside. After what felt like forever, the flickering stopped. The light was gone. Then came the knock. 3 soft taps on the front door. Slow. Measured. My blood ran cold. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Whoever or whatever was out there waited. I could feel it, standing just beyond the wood. The knocking came again, harder this time. I finally managed to whisper, "Go away," my voice barely audible. After a few seconds, the knocking stopped. I stayed like that for nearly 20 minutes before working up the courage to check. I peeked through the blinds. Nothing. No light. No figure. Just fog and darkness. I waited until morning before opening that door. There were no footprints on the porch. No marks. No sign that anyone had been there. But lying in the middle of the doormat was something small, an old glass lantern, covered in soot. Inside it was a burned-out candle. That was the last night I stayed in that house. I packed my things and left the next day. When I told my landlord what happened, she looked genuinely confused. Said the farmhouse across the field had burned down 20 years ago. Lightning strike. Nothing left but the foundation. But here's the thing. When I drove past that area a week later, I slowed down and looked out across the field. The ruins were still there, blackened and collapsed. But as the sun started setting, I saw a faint orange flicker in the air above them, like a candle burning in an upstairs window that didn't exist anymore. And I swear, for just a second, I saw a figure standing next to it. Tall. Still. Watching.